Hi there, I'm Trevor Coote, and this is Business is Fucking Hard, the podcast where business owners pull back the curtain and talk about the realities of owning a business. We'll hear their stories, learn some lessons, and have some fun along the way. Thanks for joining us. On today's episode, we are joined by Emma May, founder and creative director of Sophie Grace Designs, Inc., an online women's wear brand offering a fashionable workwear collection. After practicing law, launching a real estate career, working in the office of the Premier of Alberta, and starting her own real estate brokerage, Emma launched a company to help her solve the problem she saw in her own closet. That looking effortless should be, well, effortless. I hope you enjoy this episode. Emma May, welcome to the podcast.
Great. Nice to be here. Thanks, Trevor.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. This is going to be fun. You and I don't know each other. This is going to be my introduction to your story as well as the listeners. But just seeing your kind of exposure on LinkedIn, especially on social media, and the vulnerability that you're displaying as a business owner, I think it fits in nicely with the conversations that I'm trying to have here on the podcast. So we'll get right into it. As I start with everyone, I want to know what your introduction to business, to entrepreneurship was. Did that happen earlier in life? Was that something that happened later through school, or an introduction into what was your first exposure to entrepreneurship and business?
It probably was my parents. And although I guess we wouldn't really consider them traditional entrepreneurs, maybe I'm very lucky. My parents were professionals. Like my mom was a lawyer. My dad was a doctor. But they both left, sort of these larger practices. My dad left a hospital group, started up his own thing. And my mom did the same, right? She left a big firm, started up her own firm, had to get her own clients in the door, grew it and ran it. So I'd watched my parents take those sort of risks, but that was more in the service area of things. Right.
Right.
And so I do delineate often like service versus product, right? Because it's a very different world, right? Like service is incredibly difficult to scale, right? Like It's just a harder beast to scale because you're relying on, people, hours and then number of people and a certain type of person. If you're really doing something, in medicine, it's like, oh, you need X number of doctors to do that thing, or you need, the lawyers that you want them who fit your, obviously fit the practice type and the professionalism that you want. So that was probably my first exposure to it. And then I had been, I'd been a lawyer earlier in my life. So I was a lawyer for 10 years. And then I was at Ferris in Vancouver, actually, that was where
okay.
And then when I had kids, and so when my kids were like 10 and 12, and I was like sort of mid 30s then. And I was like, okay, I can't do these billable hours. This just doesn't work. So I went into real estate. And that was like, it gave me an opportunity to be around my kids a bit more, but not so much, right? Like, and be able to work from home. So I had a lot more flexibility. And then it was sort of like also leveraging relationships as opposed to the billable hour. And of course I was in that for like literally a year. And then I was like, I want to make this better. I don't like these giant brokerages. I think I could do a better brokerage. We're going to design a better brokerage. It's going to be this, this, and this. So I started a real estate brokerage called Charles Real Estate here in Calgary. And Charles has got like 75 realtors now, I think. And I'm not super on the ground there anymore. Obviously, I still have an interest in it and stuff, but like my new ventures taken over my life. But that was probably... And that was really very much like that entrepreneurial sort of instinct of you just want something to exist that doesn't exist yet. And so you're like, well, let's just make it.
Right.
Right?
So So there's that's such a fun journey. So going back, let's step all the way back to your parents. I mean, how old were you when you saw them kind of step out of the structured environment, both in kind of healthcare and in legal?
Dad, I was probably like 10, and then my
Yeah.
mom, that was later. That wasn't until I think it was in my teens, actually. Yeah.
But old enough to appreciate that
Yeah.
they're stepping out on a ledge here. There's going to be extra requirements, and then were you able to kind of differentiate between them being like pre kind of the business side versus after they went out and ventured into business? Were you able to differentiate dad just being a doctor, mom just being a lawyer, and now coming home and talking about, okay, we're having HR issues, we're having, have to do the books, we've got to hire somebody for this, and kind of different conversations around the kitchen table?
Yeah, there was much more of that. And even things like, because I went to law school, and obviously was a lawyer. But what was interesting about watching my mother's experience with that was, I think a lot of people go into law school and they think it's just, and then you go practice law and it's all about sort of, you go to a firm and then you get to the next level and then you get to the next level, or you go into government or you do this thing and it's just about the work itself. Right. And
right.
really meaty into the work. But what was really clear right away with her was like, you eat what you kill, right? You needed to get a client and you needed to sell yourself. And so, that was less so in medicine because people always need the doctor.
Sure. Yeah. Doors are open. People are coming in.
Yeah. In terms of like my mom, watching her really be like laser focused on building her reputation, asking for the work, setting up a referral network, being really out there and being like, no, we're getting the file in the door. And what that showed me too was that the more you controlled the ability to get the client, the more you set your own path in life, right? And that if you could do sales, regardless of what it was that you were selling, you really are writing your own ticket, right? And it's about that. And so that is like sort of this skill set that in many ways is like, it transcends everything, right? Like it moves into everything. I don't care what industry you're in, right? Someone's got to be selling.
Well, and there's like nowhere that's more prominent than what you're doing now, and we'll get to that. I want to leave. We're going to leave the listener hanging here for a second because I do want to talk about like that experience. Talking about your mom getting in the next file. Did you reflect on that as you made the decision to leave the law firm and go into real estate before you started the brokerage? But because all of a sudden you're really moving from that environment of, okay, I'm part of something bigger. I'm part of this machine. Yeah. Now I'm going to step out into the fray and I'm responsible for generating my own business.
Yeah. I knew that I would be able to do it. I just knew that I could do that. And to be honest, I just didn't want to be tied to for me, it was about the billable hours. So it was about, well, do I dig in and leverage and go on that side? And, I hated litigation. That wasn't going to be my thing. I was going to do more corporate anyway. And yeah, I just didn't want to be tied to the desk.
Yeah.
So, and it is a leap of faith, right? You're in the real estate world. It is that leap of faith being like, okay, can I go get my own work? Right. And how do I establish connection? And how do I establish relationships? And how do I establish trust? And over the course of that, of my sort of real estate career, you watch people come and go and they, they do all these things. And there'd been there's this one older realtor, and I think she still is practicing, Gisela Davis. She's a legend here, right? Like I think she's like 85 and she's still doing stuff. But This is a woman who had been in the business forever and literally, and high-end stuff. And it was just, she had serviced family after family after family, right? And it was always called Gisela because it was Gisela took care of you. right? It
Right.
wasn't this idea of, what's the next thing? We're going to milk this. We're going to get, it wasn't boiler room type shit. It was literally like, no, this is my network. These are my people. This is who I service. This is who comes to me because of the fact that they know that I'm going to represent them in the best possible way. So in many ways, when I was like leaving law, I had been thinking about real estate much more from this perspective of like, like your banker or your lawyer or, your doctor, that I wanted to be this trusted professional that people call to get, a level of service from me that they would expect, right? That it
Right.
would be an elevated level of service and there'd be this like level of professionalism involved.
And so when you like, obviously there's got to be some alignment there. The brand that you were trying to establish or that you thought you could establish as you
Yeah.
broke out or changed industries, was that like you saw the opportunity for a brokerage, like expanding that brand into more of a brokerage environment? Was that the gap that you saw for the opportunity for the brokerage?
Yeah, the opportunity there for me was like, how do we get like really excellent people who are dedicated to like just a next level customer service experience, right? And marry it with unbelievable marketing and visual and design, right?
Yeah.
And do that part really, really well and become a boutique that was known for that.
Yeah. And technology is helping like really moved a lot of that forward and maybe leveled that playing field, but you still have to be able to engage with that and as a brokerage put those opportunities and tools in front of the agents at the brokerage.
Yeah, totally. And have an expectation of them, right?
Yeah.
And communicate the expectation of what it is to be an agent at a brokerage that has a higher standard.
Yeah. So we've got a transition from kind of a comfortable environment based on education that you've invested in at a law office to more independence as a real estate professional out there, creating your own brand, high customer service, seeing the gap, starting a brokerage, and then what happened next? Because this is the part that fascinates me. Like you moved from that environment into this.
Well, no, actually, there was an interlude.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So then there was like this massive flood in Calgary, right?
What year was that? 2021.
2013.
13. Okay.
So 2013, there's this big flood in Calgary, and I was living there, and a ton of my customers, clients, lived there. Everybody's houses were like underwater in the areas that I serviced, and as was the downtown core.
Right.
And, the government came out with some response, and being the nerdy lawyer that I am, I was like, well, this is shit. So I remember sitting in my living room writing this long email, and it was like, this is an improper policy response. This is what the policy response should have been. We should be looking at mitigation. We should be doing these things, blah, blah, blah. And it was like long and, nerdy. And I remember looking at my husband at the time, and I was like, I'm going to send this. And he was like, yeah, I'm not sure you should. And it went viral. So next thing you know, I was like hosting a meeting of 800 residents, right? The government had shown up, and so I was like queen shit disturber. And we started, lobbying for, flood mitigation, right? And I had to go and learn. So I was like volunteered for like 18 months. So I had to go learn all about this stuff, right? Like I was like, what is the like tree ring data for the area? What is the like historical environmental thing? And then there were like 3 different options. And one of them was the one that is now built, was called the Springbank Offstream Reservoir. And what that was so because Calgary's built at the confluence of 2 rivers, right? So,
right.
And it does experience historical flooding. So you have this, and so this is like this like weird thing that takes water into a reservoir. a natural reservoir, and then it sort of drains out. Oh shit, there go my headphones. Anyways, drains out when things are when things are complete. And so I lobbied hard for that. And then at the time, Jim Prentice was becoming premier, and I got in touch with him or he got in touch with me because he's like, "Hey, I hear you're a shit disturber." Like, yeah, but you really should do this. And went and explained it all to him, had a meeting with him, and he said, "This actually makes perfect sense, and I want to hire you." So he hired me. So I was executive director of the Premier's office for Southern Alberta for then, it was like a 9-month period of time that he was in office. So I did that for a while. And that was actually really, really interesting because that was this wild world where I got to interact with, titans of business, government, and then nonprofit, the arts, and you sort of see how they all come together as in this web to form, what really is like the foundation of our whole society and culture, right? And that is what community is sort of the intersection of all of those things. So it was a super cool experience, right?
Yeah. Very cool. I mean, obviously completely unplanned. And yeah. I mean, sometimes sometimes those are the best experiences that you can have is when you don't know that something's missing from your life. Yeah. But even the way that you got into it, like being super passionate about something, bringing community together, right? Yeah. Like that was the whole point initially, bring the community together, have bigger conversations. And then that ends up being the job that you're doing is bringing community together and having bigger conversations.
Yeah. And having these big conversations. Yeah. It was super cool. And then we lost the election. So I didn't have a job. Right. Then I was like, okay, well, I'll go back to real estate, and did like a rebrand on the company at the time and some stuff. But I remember, but by then I'd been approached to be on boards in the community. So I was on the Parks Foundation board, and I remember and that was the transition. So I was standing in my closet because I'd gotten rid of all my suits because we'd lost the election. And so I was standing in my closet going, why the hell do I not have an ivory blouse that matches this ivory pencil skirt that I want to wear? And I've got to dress up for this thing. And this is difficult. And, and so I had this total closet meltdown. And while I was in it, I was dreaming up what I would want my perfect work wardrobe to look like, right? And how it should be modular, and how it should be comfortable, and how things should just mix and match. And then that became, an obsession. That has led me where I am today.
Yeah. So we're going to park the word obsession, and we're going to come back to it because you look at kind of all of the stories that you've shared so far. And I mean, some people would say serial entrepreneur. Some people would say that, that you see a problem you want to fix. Yeah. Some people like a gap. And so far that's been kind of the narrative. Every time you're starting something, it's standing in a closet looking at, this isn't working for me, I'm going to fix it. Yeah. Or there's a flood, this isn't working for me.
Not work. Or why is there not a brokerage that offers these things?
Yep. Exactly. So we'll get back to that in a bit. But yeah, so you're standing in your closet, you see that there's an opportunity or potential for having different options for your own wardrobe.
Yeah.
What does that next step look like to go out and say, I'm going to be a fashion guru in Southern Alberta of all places, and start my own brand?
Yeah. So well, basically I mapped it out and had this very clear idea of what I wanted to do, right? I really wanted to focus on modularity at the time, right? These are sort of key pieces if you put these together. And one of the things for me that kind of stood out for that was I can be kind of the fashion girly. I can be way too into this shit. I've probably spent way more money on this stuff than I should have. I am that person. I was Elle Woods at law school, right? I was showing up and, in my fit, my friends are in their sweats and they're like, what are you doing?
Love it.
And, but that was it. My friends were in their sweats. And so I also recognized that there was like a huge cohort of professional women who do not like clothes and fashion and do not like shopping, and they find it unbelievably painful and a giant pain in the ass. And there are not a lot of, and so, you know, it was interesting because when dudes get jobs like a law firm or something, they go down to like the menswear store, and there's this like nice professional who takes you aside and gets like you 5 suits and the ties and everything matches, and they show you how it all goes together, and you're like sent on your way, and that's it. And for women, it's like you get to go down to like the mall, and there's some teenager who's like, that looks cute. And, you know, you're like, that's not really what I'm going for, but sure, thanks. So what I wanted to do was like build something that made it super easy for that woman, right? That it was like, here, we're going to give you something that's really classic, that's really basic, that's got like matching colors throughout the whole thing, that you can put this together in like 20 different ways and you're not going to screw it up. And you know that when you show up, you're going to look great and you're going to look classic, and you are going to show up, not your outfit. Right.
Yep.
So that's like really sort of and it really was about, we're going to make life easy for you. And that was the foundation of it. So I mapped out what sort of those pieces were that had always sort of served me in my past. Right. And then, you know, talked to other women about what it was that they were looking for. And then I, you know, reached out to my community. So I have a half sister who was, she happened to work at Lululemon. She's worked at Aritzia as well. And she said, oh, I said, well, do you know anyone who can help me with this? And she's like, oh, I've got this friend, Lisa, and she used to be a head of product at Lulu, and she's now home with her kids, right? So she's just doing some consulting because they're really young. So I called Lisa up and we started doing consulting. I said, this is what I want to do. And so she sort of guided me through, you know, okay, let's go. We went to LA, we sourced fabric, we found a designer, we designed a whole bunch of stuff. Then we were like, there's too much fussiness in this. It doesn't all go together. So she and I stripped the designs back ourselves, right? We worked through that. And then we came up with sort of 12 pieces, and I went to the bank and took out a $150K line of credit and ordered it all. And then it all showed up on my doorstep February 23rd, 2020.
Yeah.
COVID. Just everybody didn't need workwear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
3 weeks before.
Yeah.
So I just want to just take a quick pause there and go back a little bit. I talked about the pieces. You went to LA. You did a lot around the clothing. What kind of focus did you put on the business plan? Like what did you see as being the opportunity to like from a market perspective?
Yeah. I mean, what was interesting was that sort of the marketing perspective. I mean, I knew the market was there, right?
Okay.
Like, because I knew this woman, right? Like, and that continues to be true, right? Like I know this woman cold. I have worked with her for 20 years. I've worked with her in government. I've worked with her in law. I've worked with her in real estate. I've worked with her, right? Like I know who she is. And I know what her pain points are, right?
Yeah.
And I know what else is out there and what isn't out there. So I know where to lean into that. Marketing was something that we really, at the time, you know, the initial plan had really been all of these women's events, all of these conferences, let's show up, pop-ups, community, right? And all of a sudden, none of that existed for us, right? So we really had to then lean into digital marketing, right? Because not only did then at that time, when we launched, my customer not need my product, but there was, you know, I couldn't get out and show it to her other than on the internet.
Right. Mm-hmm. Right. What about market research around price point and understanding what it was going to cost you to build out?
And also I had Lisa, so we knew what margin we needed to have.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's like, and to be honest, like that's been the gold of this from day one. It was like, you know, I think a lot of people get into this and they think, oh, well, we just will make these beautiful things and people will want them. And the truth is if you do not have a margin at a certain level, you will not survive. And so, you know, I had the professional with me who was like, this is the margin we need on everything. So
Right.
everything that we did had to be able to fit into that.
Yeah. So you knew what your end point was, and you work backwards from there on each piece.
Garment. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you first launched, or not launched, when you we took out that $150,000 line of credit and ordered the pieces, you still had the brokerage at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And what was that balance like? Was it taking a lot of your time?
I did a lot. I mean, I sold a lot of houses to fund this venture, right? So I'd sell a house and pump the money into, paying Lisa, buying fabric, keeping things on the rails, right? Like, yeah. So that was sort of a self-funding mechanism for a while there.
Right. Yeah. So definitely balancing both before you took the full plunge.
Probably at about year, 1.5 to it was.
Okay.
I think it was sort of when I first brought on someone who was sort of cut me a relatively significant sized check that I was like, okay, this has to be the sole focus, because this isn't just about me anymore and my money. This is about other people's money now. And the expectation is that I now work for my shareholders.
Right.
They require my full focus.
Yeah. I think you've posted about raising capital as well. And so we'll get into that. I want to go back to those initial days. So the idea was to show product in person, to be available at events or pop-ups in person. Obviously making that forced decision to say, okay, now we're an e-commerce environment.
Mm-hmm.
What did that transition look like? Did you have to start from scratch on a website and kind of building the e-commerce piece?
We knew that we were always going to have the Shopify site, right? So we knew
that
the e-commerce would be really the platform from which we would be doing this. But in terms of like sort of new customer acquisition, the initial plan had not been, like Facebook ads and Meta and stuff like that. It had been more about, organic and really in person and driving that. And then of course we were like, well, we better learn about Meta. Right.
Yeah.
And, you hire your first ad agency.
Yeah. And that all happened super quick. Yeah.
Yeah.
So based on what you kind of expected for sales and kind of anticipated you would need in order to put in the next order for product, were you able to meet some of those goals, even though you had to shift to that virtual environment?
Interesting, because we then things started really taking off. Like our first year, we had 100% year-over-year growth, right? So obviously, and then we had that again the next year, right? So things started to really catch on, and it was interesting because our first run, we had a few pieces that were sort of different fabrics, and then we had this one fabric, which, is this thing I'm wearing now, but it's like stretchy, it's machine washable. It still is like super professional looking. It feels like butter on. It's super comfortable. So the way I describe it now is like Theory and Lululemon had a baby, right? So basically like you feel like you're wearing Lulu, but it looks like, you're proper suiting.
Right.
And dresses and stuff. So I ended up, we ended up doing that, and there were a few standout pieces, and women were like, oh, these are the most comfortable pants I've ever worn. I can wear these on my Zoom calls.
Right.
And so then we were like, well, we should make a blazer out of this. Right. And that was sort of how that evolution happened. So what started then was new product development started to really lean into this, like the comfort piece and the washability of everything was really then what everybody really, really wanted, right? Like people were like, oh my God, I love this. This is like almost a new concept. So they started to gravitate towards that. And that became, in many ways, really kind of the defining hallmark of what we are right now. Like I remember I actually went to New York and we designed like some really beautiful wool suiting, and like I loved it. It was elegant, drapey, looked like a Prada suit. It was like whoa, I love this. And I remember like Jody Wilson-Raybould walked into my, my showroom in Vancouver, and I was like, oh, I've got to show you this suit. It's so good. And she was like, why would I buy that when I can buy your stretchy stuff? And I was like,
yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I had to go through too, this whole sort of process of being like, this isn't about what I want.
Yep.
This has nothing to do with what I want now. That this is actually, I thought my customer wanted some things, but actually what my customer is telling me is that she wants these things.
Right.
And then it was all about, okay, how do we make that? And I think I did go through sort of like this period of like fashion girly mourning where I was like, you know, I'm not going to make my like oversized silk poofy blah, blah. Right. And now I'm like, actually, no, this is really cool challenge. Like, how do we do this really beautifully and give, you know, women this level of comfort and softness and that still is like really classic and beautiful.
And like that I really appreciate the wording that you just used, the mourning piece, because so often for business owners, you have a vision, right? Mm-hmm. Like, this is where I want to take my business. This is what I see being kind of not necessarily the ultimate goal, but certainly the path to get to kind of this future that I envision for my business. And then to your point, the customer says, no. That's not the vision we have for your business. The vision we have is comfort first, not wool.
And they'll tell you in what they buy.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, exactly. Yeah. And so you have to
sales, and you're like,
yeah,
I get it now. Yeah.
But you also have to be okay with that. Like, there is that kind of that understanding that, okay, I've got to change from what I was thinking, that potentially mourning or whatever that would look like.
Yeah.
But also you have to be okay with that new direction. If ultimately your customers said, no, we want you to focus in this area, and you're like, that's not really the thing that interests me. I can't get interested about that.
Yeah.
But you were able to. You thought that was a cool challenge.
I thought it was a cool challenge, and I also started to realize that actually what interested me was my customer.
Yeah.
Right? And that actually you know, the sort of some of the fashiony stuff and the designing something cool, like that's fun. But when you get an email from a customer that says, you've changed the way I get ready for work in the morning.
Right.
You've changed the way I go on trips and business travel. You've made my life so easy. I am so happy. And then you look them up and you're like, they're this baller, right? And you're like, oh my God, we've had this like really positive impact on this person's life.
Yeah.
And she feels now her best, and and that became for me my North Star, right?
Right.
Is how am I making my customers feel every day? And are they feeling like everything that we're doing is supporting them and making them be able to do all the cool shit they do in their world easier and make their life easier, right? And like, so, and that was and the team knows that. So when we get good emails, I get them. And people email me too. I try to stay really in close touch with our customers, right? Like, I like sending personal emails out to people, and then I get like 200 emails back, and people describe their world and their life and how the product fits into it, or what it is that they want from us. And, you know, that is like, that's the magic of it, Trevor, right?
Yeah. But that's like, there's no better market research.
No.
You can't possibly go out and build a product based on anything else better than direct feedback from 200 people after you've said, how's it going today, ladies?
Yeah.
Right?
And hey, I'm thinking of doing this. What do you think? Like, you know, we did a silk line, and it was beautiful. And my customers came back and they said, it is beautiful, but I really wish it was easier to care for. Right. Yep. And they're like, I don't want to deal with the dry cleaning. I feel like it's very precious. And so we've now gone to, right, like our factories and our mills, and we've got like a washable silk fabric that's stretchy, that breathes. And so we're like, we're going to do this silk line again, but we're doing it now in a piece that you literally take off your body and throw in the washing machine.
Right.
Or you can wash it in the sink in the hotel and hang it dry in 10 minutes. Right. So we're like, okay, she's come to us and said, I still want that beauty, but I need you to add these functionalities to it. And we're like, okay, we can do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not going to lie. I would kill for something in a hotel room that I could wash in the sink and hang it to dry. Like I'm the only place,
crazy, right? Like it's like boom. You're like,
yeah.
Yeah.
The only place I use an ironing board is when I'm traveling with all of my dress shirts.
Yeah, totally. Right.
Yeah. So I want to drill down on kind of again this going to the e-commerce piece.
Yeah.
Just with the physical presence that really limits the footprint. I would think, like in your original business plan to go out to be at conferences or trade shows or pop-ups, like the physical footprint that you'd be able to accommodate to take all of your product and a pop-up store, you're not getting too far from Calgary, right? You're not doing that in Florida or something.
I've done them in Soho.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And it was a giant pain in the ass, but I did haul, 10 hockey bags of shit there. Yeah. So I have done, but no. So we do have, like, I have a showroom in Calgary and I have a showroom in Vancouver now, right? So we have, and I don't call them retail spaces because they're not sort of the traditional retail. They're more of a come on in, try it on, have a fitting. Let's make this really intimate and personal. Let's talk about what it is that you're looking for from us. And then, I mean, in Vancouver, that's where our warehouse is, so you can take it. But in Calgary, we ship it to you, right? So then you get it. And the ongoing vision really is that we have, smaller type boutique showrooms, and also they function as event spaces for us, right? So we do things like people have, we had a big law firm,
right?
And they were like, oh, we're going to gift our client, like all of our women clients, instead of a golf thing, we're going to do a shopping party and we're going to gift them this, and we're going to have like wine and cheese and styling and things like that. And so those events are, and professional women are sort of yearning for these things, opportunities to sort of get together. And that's become a real, but we now, because the collection is so large, we have to host them usually. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And what's the footprint of the business now as far as staffing and
so we did it. So we're a year, HR. 3.5, and we like our rev last year was like 3.7 mil, right? Yeah. So we're and then our goal is to get to 10 within 2 years, obviously, and then to scale further from there, right? Staff, it's interesting. Like, we've learned a lot more about how we can run this. So staffing's actually quite lean right now. Which is kind of interesting. Like I have a full-time customer service person who, for me, that's a real necessity on it. We've got obviously showroom in Calgary, and then we've got, production team in Vancouver, but that's about 3 people. Yeah. So there's not that many of us. Yeah. And then we have outside consultants doing stuff here and there too.
Right. Yeah. And then obviously the product itself, but, what do you see for that scaling? I'm assuming the majority is e-commerce.
Yeah, it's e-commerce supported by things like pop-ups, right? And so it's like, we know in the fall when we get our new stuff in, we want to go do a 2 to 3 week pop-up in Toronto. And we know that we've got like thousands of customers in Toronto already. And so it's like, we're in Toronto, bring your friends down, do some events with you. Let's build community. Let's get to know you. And then that becomes then like events that are, obviously create organic traction, and then also give you, support the, the online digital ad space and continuing to build up in there.
Yeah. Yeah. So talking scalability, talking all of that, hitting new markets and engaging new people through kind of word of mouth or existing client base. Let's go back to the conversation around capital, around raising capital. You did that in earlier days, not necessarily out of the gate, but
friends and family. So, I mean, one of the things around this so also D2C e-commerce has been going through like massive changes, right? So when I launched this in 2020 and then 2021, 22, the vibe was show traction, grow as fast as you can, right?
Right.
Like just grow. And a ton of VCs were backing, D2C brands, and that was everything, right? And so we did that, and that's expensive and it burns money. Like, I'm just going to say it just, you just burn money because you're acquiring customers and you're not quite sure at what cost. And then it's like, are you profitable on that sale? So we did that. And then really at the end in 2023, everything changed. And now the focus is first sale profitability, right? Yep. So our entire, and because, and where I'm lucky is that unlike sort of a D2C business that maybe sells like a mattress and you buy one a year and, you need like, basically need like top line, not one a year, you buy one every 10 years or 20 years. Yep. But you need that top line acquisition to be like ongoing, right? So, but my business now has got like a 40 to 50% repeat customer rate. So when we convert a customer, she really stays in our ecosystem, right? Because we're like, oh, here's the top that goes with the pants, that goes with the skirt that you already own. And here's a new piece, and here's a new color, and you like our comfort and you know our fit. So we've got this, we've got this baseline of customer that we now need to like just get new product to. Facebook ads have been a dog's breakfast for everybody. I don't know if you pay attention to that space, but for basically since February, I would say the whole sort of industry there has been struggling. I mean, I nerd out on Twitter following all the guys who are like an ad buy on that. Some people are doing just fine with it, but a lot of like the customer acquisition cost on this stuff has gone up significantly. So, where historically it might have cost us like $40 to acquire a customer, like mid-year on some things, it was like 300, right? And like, that's just not, you just can't do that. So what we've done now is we've got what's our average order value? What's our margin? What's the contribution? So how much can we actually afford to acquire a customer at on the first sale, right? And so now all of our marketing is really structured around that. And we're not going to be spending money on anything other than getting that first sale profitability. Now, we still know that because we've got this crazy lifetime value of $600 to $1,000 of this customer, that, even if we did acquire it over sort of our target's like 180 right now. Even if we acquired it higher, it's fine in the long run, but we don't have the capital in the short run to do that, right? Like that just burns your money. So then I had a factory close in Vancouver. So that was like super fun too. So most of my production is now offshore, with people who, do reformation, aloe, skims. And we're really, really happy with them. We've got all the, the sort of factory and sustainability reports that we need to, satisfy ourselves on that. So we're now leaning into this idea of we want to give our current customers more product and then grow with sort of profitability only focus. But, we incurred a bunch of debt to get ourselves to this stage. So I'm at this stage now where I'm like, look, I've now mapped out our, EBITDA positive next year. We just need to cross this threshold. So that's like sort of that's the capital raise that I'm in right now, is saying, okay, let's clean up this. We built a strong brand that's got like an incredible customer base. And now we want to go forward and like just really be able to take the revenue that we generate and move that into actual sustainable growth then.
But to I'm assuming, and I really appreciate the differentiation between where VC used to be, and it wasn't even that long ago, like you said, 24 months ago. Totally. The venture capital environment was very different, where they were looking for just bottom line or top line growth, right? Yeah. Like just show me that you can scale, right? Okay. It doesn't matter what it costs, just scale. 100%. And we're seeing this in every environment, retail as you're in, but also tech and other sectors. they're saying, okay, that's fine, but I've got to see at least a path to profitability, if not profitability today, in order to know. So having all of the, like, you just went through a myriad of metrics that give you a perfect line of sight that you did not have when you decided to launch this thing in 2020. Like, that's where I was going earlier when I said, like, what was the business plan? What was the price point? What was the, and now you've got that drilled down to so many like precise metrics.
Yeah. And now we know, right? I mean, that's and the other thing is like, I've also had the luxury of being able to actually track customer behavior for nearly 4 years, right? Like,
right.
It's like, and it hasn't changed for us, right? They come back. This is the pace they come back at. This is what they ask for more for, right? So we've got this, like, so now we're like, okay, we know what that is. So customer acquisition is still a bit nebulous, right? In terms of like, we know we can do pop-ups. We know we can do more organic. We know we can do, there's a ton of stuff we can do in that space. We know we can get Meta working for us. It's just trickier. We got to be a little more, we got to nail creative a bit better. It's not this like plug and play in the same way that it was before. Doesn't mean it's gone. It's still going to be a huge part of your marketing mix. But now it's like, okay, but the only way we're playing in that space is when we nail this profitability. And as soon as you do that there, you just hammer it, right?
Yeah.
And you go. So what we're doing is now saying we can be profitable on the current existing customer base with newness, with giving her what she needs. And then all of this here is our growth gravy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what are the chances that you see another gap in something and decide that you're the person to figure out how to fix this? Because it's fascinating to me that you've
right now. So
it's keeping your focus.
I have nice people around me who are like, Emma, put your like racehorse blinders on and just run. Well, I think what's interesting to me too, though, is actually that this customer is I'm quite actually enamored with this customer because she's generally over 40. A lot of younger brands ignore her, but she has money and she has capital and she's not interested in your crop top. And she, is looking for like the perfect work bag and she doesn't wear heels anymore. So what the hell shoe is she wearing to work? Right. Like, so there are, there's lots of things we can get, like
sure.
It's infinite, to be honest with you. Like I can think of like a billion ways. And even things like then there's, oh, well, what if she's traveling? Like, how do we set up like a community and a network? Maybe there's a bunch of single women who travel and they're really interesting and they want to, like, if they're in like Paris and they want to have dinner with someone, maybe we have some kind of like, so there's all these sort of, I'm like, what is this woman's world? And what are all these other things in this world that drive her a bit nuts, or where there's opportunities for us to solve those problems for her, right? So, I mean, so I think, yes, but I think I think for me now, it's going to sort of be framed around this, if that makes sense.
Totally. I have to say that, like when through doing my Master's of Business Administration, MBA, you do the marketing course, and in the marketing course you do the customer profile and try to figure out who the customer is for this particular business and all of that kind of stuff. And I have to say that I absolutely love your connection to that individual. Mm-hmm. You've been able to identify, like, you can tell that you have a true connection mm-hmm. to every single customer by virtue of who this woman is. And I could never see that being a possibility in kind of the studying and the educational environment, but to see you talking so passionately and so, like, that's a relationship. That's really, really cool.
It's totally a relationship. And like I was saying earlier, right? Like for me, that was that North Star, right? Was, and in many ways, and I have to say, like, my customers really are ballers. Like they're like, I'm like, they're the CEOs, they're premiers, they're mayors, they're, governors.
Jody Wilson-Raybould.
They're governors of the Bank of Canada. They're running like the biggest investment funds in Canada. They're partners at every law firm. They are, my customers are rock stars, and I'm kind of in awe of them. So I feel this, like, I'm like, oh my God, I get to like help you in some way and help you feel great and help you achieve all these things that you want to achieve. And then you kind of get to like vicariously watch them chase their dreams. Right. And know also that at 7 a.m. when their kids, pulling on their pants and they can't figure out what to wear and somebody's bitching on the phone line at them, that we can make stuff a little bit easier for them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I just like all of that connection and the fact that, I mean, any aspect that you can make somebody more comfortable in their own skin and in their own environment, right? And add to that confidence that you're able to. Confidence comes from, like, it has to start with being comfortable, right? And you contributing like to all of that just is amazing.
Yeah, like you don't feel, and I mean, and that's also ties into our design structure, which is also like, I mean, we know there's some women who won't wear a tight dress, and there's some women who will. Some are more into pants. So, so we're trying to like cover all these bases. But at the core of it, we also want to create stuff that's so simple, but well cut and fits your body really, really well. And then it doesn't, and then the piece itself becomes almost like like the palette on which you can draw and on which you then shine through. So it's about, I want the woman to show up, not the dress to show up. Right. So like, it's funny because people will send me pictures of, especially politicians, and they're like, is she wearing your thing? And I'm like, yeah, I'm pretty sure it is. And for me, I like that. Right. Like, I like that it's like, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I don't know, but she looks good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah. Where did the name Sophie Grace Designs come from?
Well, my daughter's name is Sophie, and then Grace is sort of a family name. But at the core of it too, there was this idea of, I had this sort of like techie name when I first, I won't even say it, when I first sort of thought it up. And then what I realized was I really wanted to convey elegance, right? And I wanted to, and there was something about the pieces that we were doing that was about simplicity and about elegance. And I felt like that both of those names really, conveyed that and had more of the longevity of what like a fashion brand or a clothing brand could have, which is, and so for me, that was the context around that, as opposed to some sort of like cutesy tech name or something. I don't know.
I agree. I think both as standalones, but certainly together, it's an elegant brand. Yeah. For what it's worth, coming from this guy on the other end of the.
It's okay.
Yeah. So you kind of touched on it. Last piece I want to know about the what's next. Like it's building this, like building out the community a little bit more. And by community, I mean like customer base, but also the people who you interact with.
Yeah, I mean, I really want us to. My vision of this really is that that if a woman gets a job in North America, that she goes, oh, I better go to Sophie Grace to get my stuff. That's like the big picture, right? A bit like you go to Lululemon to get your gym gear, right? I want us to be sort of that first thought. So the vision is a lot larger than where I'm at now, but but we have a crazy, culty, loyal customer base, and that gives me faith that there are many, many more of them out there, and that we can keep, delivering products that satisfy that customer and get into the US. We started to move into the US in February, and we sort of moved up from, about 8% of our customers to it being 20% of our revenue.
Wow.
And those American customers behave the same way our Canadian customers behave. So, my goal is to export to that US market and to really, and to be a player down there.
Yeah. Really, really incredible. Emma, this has been an amazing conversation. You've had an incredible journey. I hope you'll allow me to invite you back in 18 months and do a check-in, because I think that like we only touched on some of the areas, of kind of challenge for a startup, and especially in this space. And I want to just do a check-in and see how things are going, because it's really incredible.
Let me get through them first.
Yeah, of course.
You might have better perspective on them then. And I won't cry.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Is it?
Now, there are always days. There are always meltdown days, right?
Yeah.
There's always a meltdown day. It's usually followed by something like I get an email and then I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, all right, we'll be fine.
Yeah.
But there's always a meltdown day.
And that's the case with business in general. And that's the fun part. That's the fun part of these conversations. I genuinely have had strangers reach out and say, I can totally relate to that conversation that you had with that. And it's just nice to know I'm not alone, right? Oh, yeah. People in business.
There are days that feel so alone, right? Like I have a great, like my, Lisa's not a financial partner. I mean, she's earned in equity, but I'm on my own on that risk. Like that is my risk. The personal guarantees are in my name alone.
Right.
And those are the things that make you feel ill, right?
Yep.
And those are the things that keep you up at night. And those are the places where you wonder, what am I doing? And that's why and for me, that's also why staying so in touch with the customer is so important, because it's the really one reminder of why.
Yeah. It justifies you taking on some of that risk.
Yeah.
Really incredible. Emma, I can say it's been a great to hear your story. I really appreciate you, sharing and being vulnerable. Let's do a check-in in 18 to 24 months and see how things are going.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Thank you so much.